Good morning again. My name is Kelly Wing. I'm the program manager at the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. Any day that I get to share a space with our New Hampshire nonprofit colleagues is a great start to my day. Lovely to see you all. Pleased to be joined by Sarah Brock and Mark Zankel this morning, who are going to be discussing how solar can help you put more money towards your mission. And we're just going to get right into it. I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So nice to see you. Sorry we're not in the room together. That always is better, but Sarah and I will do our best to have a good session with you today. I am Mark Zankel, and I'm the Director of Community Solar for Revision Energy. I'll tell you a little bit more about our company, but I've been at Revision for 2 years. Before that, I worked for 27 years for the Nature Conservancy. So I come from the nonprofit sector, spent most of my career there, including 20 years at the Nature Conservancy in New Hampshire. I have been a member of the New Hampshire Nonprofit Center, been to many of the conferences, so I feel like I'm with my peeps here today. Let me turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Sarah Brock. I'm the director of our Energy Circuit Rider program at Clean Energy New Hampshire. I see some familiar faces here today, and you'll hear more about me when we get to the program.
And we'd love, as we jump into our slides, we'd love to know a little bit more about who's on the Zoom with us today. So one thing we might ask you to do, if you're willing, is to click on the chat, which is the button down at the bottom of the screen, and just let us know what your organization is, where you're located, and if you own your own building or property. That's kind of helpful for this conversation. So that would, I think, enrich it for us. And also, I think I'll say on the front end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So Sarah and I have a bunch of slides to get through, and you can certainly stop us along the way and we'll do our best, but also we encourage you to put your questions into the chat and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end.
I'll also just note that I noticed there are several folks who are here as resources for nonprofits related to this topic. So make a note about that as well, and we'll try to make sure we spotlight you by the end of the session.
Okay, so let's get rolling here. We're going to talk about solar opportunities for nonprofits in New Hampshire. And there's a few things that we're hoping that you'll take away from today's session. First, why go solar? What are some of those opportunities? How can you envision solar for your nonprofit? Of course, super important. What are some of the ways that you can finance a solar system? Helping you think about, is this the right opportunity, or is this a good option for my nonprofit to explore? And then, yeah, you can do this. We want to give you some real life case studies that we'll share. We've got some other folks who can add some of their own experiences. So we promised a little bit of solar trivia. This is really hard to do on Zoom because I can't actually see any of you right now, but we'll run through it. These are super hard questions. So it's a little bit of solar Jeopardy. And the first one is 60 minutes. And so what's the question here? What's the average amount of good weather we get on a typical New Hampshire spring weekend? What's the name of a TV news show that's actually been in the news lately? How long do I have to be in this session? And how long does it take the sun to send enough solar energy to Earth to power all of humanity's current electricity needs? And you guessed it, they're all correct, but the one we'll focus on a little bit more today is the incredible power of the sun and the capability of that resource to power the Earth and all of our needs. All right, second answer, Northern Spain, Monaco, and New Hampshire. And what's the question? 3 places that have very little in common? Or what 3 places share the same latitude and a comparably strong solar resource? And it's surprising to some people that to discover that our latitude here in northern New England is identical to what we think of as really warm and sunny places like northern Spain and Marseille, France, and Monaco on the Mediterranean. And although we don't have that warm year-round climate because of the way the Gulf Stream current pulls cold weather down from the north. The great news is that we actually live at a very sunny latitude and we can produce a lot of solar energy here. The third jeopardy is solar. So what are we talking about today? Or what's the upper chamber in a medieval house? Or what's the cheapest and fastest to deploy form of new energy generation in the United States? And these are also all true. I didn't know the second one until I was Googling this recently to prepare for today. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about solar and the deployment of solar in the US and why now is a good time. So let me just take a minute to just introduce you to our company, Revision Energy. We're a mission-driven, 100% employee-owned solar company with offices and operations in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Our roots are in solar, and today we're the core construction company. We help communities, families, businesses, and nonprofits to access the financial and the environmental benefits of solar energy. We work in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and here in New Hampshire, we have 2 branches. Our primary branch is in Brentwood, and we have also a branch in the Upper Valley up in Enfield. During our 21 years, we've installed a whole lot of renewable energy and clean energy systems, saved our customers nearly $60 million, and we've kept a whole lot of carbon dioxide from being emitted. And as a certified B Corporation, when I came to Revision from my career at the Nature Conservancy, there's a lot of nonprofit feel in this organization. We're part of a community of over 5,000 like-minded businesses worldwide who agree that businesses can marry profitability with doing right by their employees, the communities where we operate, and the environment. Other companies that are B Corps you might know of, Ben & Jerry's here in New Hampshire, Badger. So let me talk a little bit about solar and why goes solar. And I think the first thing I'll say is it's getting warmer out there. This kind of blew my mind. 2024 was the warmest year on record. That didn't blow my mind, but when you look at this chart, which uses the 1950s to 1970s as kind of a baseline, you can see global temperatures. So we're not here to debate climate change. I just note that the climate is getting warmer, and we are now seeing, it's not so much climate change, but climate damage. I talked about this early about why solar. So this is this image shows the amount of energy output in terawatts. We think of everything in energy as watts. That's available, and you can look at solar, 23,000 terawatts a year. The little blue dot is the total world energy use per year, which is about 16 terawatts. And then you can see how that compares to both other renewable resources and non-renewable resources. There is a lot of solar energy available if we can harvest it and use it to power our electricity needs. Anyone who's paid electricity bills in New Hampshire knows that over time, not in any individual rate period, but over time, electricity is getting more expensive. And this chart shows New Hampshire electricity rates for the blue is residential, the aqua is commercial, and the lighter green is industrial. And they've all been growing, residential about 3.5% a year over the past 22 years, commercial about 3% a year. The long-term trends are clear, although it has been nice to see a little relief this past year. At the same time, the cost of solar has been going down. It's dropped more than 40% in the last decade alone. Seeing a little bit of a bump recently because of tariffs and some of the other drivers that you're all well aware of. But over time, again, the trends are clear. The cost of solar has gone and will continue to go down. And in fact, I mentioned this earlier, but solar and wind are the lowest cost forms of energy and the fastest forms of energy. Well, solar in particular, fastest form of energy that you can develop today. I haven't updated this for 2024, but the trend is the same. Solar was more than 50% of the new generating capacity that was brought online in the United States in 2023. And again, same trend in 2024. And this is really cool. This is a first. This is last month, April. There was more clean energy on the US grid than fossil fuel energy. That is awesome. We've gotten close a couple times before, but last month, first time. And here in New Hampshire, if I showed this relative to our neighboring states, it would be a less pretty picture. Our neighboring states have better solar policy and incentives, but we're coming on in New Hampshire, and you can see that solar is gaining momentum here. So I came to solar from the conservation world, and I was not a solar expert, so I like to not assume that people really understand how a solar array works. So I just want to take a minute to kind of do like a little how does it actually work here? So solar panels can go on your roof or on the ground. The sun emits photons, which are basically like energy waves and particles that are created in the sun's core. They reach the earth. And in a nutshell, solar panels generate electricity when those photons hit solar cells. Solar cells are primarily silicon, and they absorb those photons, and they use essentially photovoltaic effect is what it's called, and they convert those photons into electricity. So those are your panels, and they feed that electricity in direct current, DC, into an inverter. An inverter essentially takes that DC electricity and converts it into power that can power your appliances in your house. So it can go right into your meter, or can go into the grid. And that's in the form of AC, or alternating current electricity. And so in this system, the solar produces the power, the power goes to the inverter. The inverter sends the power into your home or your building where it's used, if electricity is being used. And then if there's a surplus, it pushes it into the grid. There's some terms you'll hear in solar, lots of jargon. I just want to decode a couple of them. The first is on-site versus off-site. So on-site, an on-site PV array or PV photovoltaics, is co-located with the energy user or users. So this is typically what you think of as a rooftop array, but it could be a ground mount, and it's co-located with where the energy is being used. An off-site array is not co-located with the energy user. These are typically large ground mounts, what you might think of as a community solar array, where the array is built off-site and it pushes energy directly into the grid, but that energy does directly offset a number of energy users, whether it's hundreds of homes, or it could be schools or municipal buildings or other energy users, but it's not feeding directly into those users' meters. And then you'll also hear these terms behind the meter or front of the meter. And behind the meter essentially means the generation from your solar array first gets used to satisfy that on-site energy demand. So for this home here, again, the solar feeds into an inverter, and it's first going into that building to offset whatever energy is being used at that time. The surplus energy goes into the grid. And this kind of a system in New Hampshire, every state has a different energy compensation program. But in New Hampshire, this gives you considerably better energy compensation for your solar arrays. So we always advise people, if you can put in a system that goes behind the meter and feeds your energy use first, that's better. But that's not possible always, and solar can still make a lot of sense if it's front of the meter. And again, that means all the generation feeds directly into the grid. You are compensated for that energy, but not quite as good a rate as if you're behind the meter. We could talk more about that if folks want to. So how does a solar project come to life? There's policies and incentives that need to be in place. Really important. A customer then says, yes, I want to go forward with a solar developer like Revision or one of the other good companies that are out there. And then there's a whole bunch of work that happens. Design and engineering, due diligence, interconnection. You have to make sure that the utility will allow you to plug this system into the grid where you're located, permitting, and then financing. How long does that take? 4 to 6 months. Could be longer. It depends upon the type of system, but for your typical rooftop system, 4 to 6 months is about the right time. Larger ground mounts can be a little bit longer, particularly because of these two steps, interconnection and permitting, that have some timelines that are out of our control. And then you construct it and you energize it. That's when you turn it on. Always a happy day. Good day for ribbon cutting. And that also, again, typical rooftop system might take 4 to 6 months. Larger ground mount could be up, 8 months up to a year. Sounds good. How do we pay for it? I'm just going to give you a little bit of a highlight reel here. There's really kind of two fundamental ways that entities bring on a solar array. The first is what we call a turnkey purchase. This is where you purchase the array outright on the front end. This is what we call direct ownership, and it results in the greatest lifetime project savings for a nonprofit. Right now, there's a federal 30% rebate. It is essentially a tax credit in the form of a rebate for non-tax paying entities. And so it takes 30% really right off the top, which means that the array really only has a net investment of 70% of the initial project cost. Super beneficial, under a little bit of attack in Congress right now, but we're hoping that that will continue. There's also state grants and incentives that may be available. New Hampshire has some actually really terrific community solar and local solar grant programs for different kinds of entities. We can talk more about that, and Sarah's going to get more into these funding mechanisms. Donor-supported fundraising. We've done a number of projects with nonprofits where their donors have stepped forward and been interested in helping to fund those arrays, both because of sustainability goals, but also to help save the nonprofit money over time so they can put more money to mission. And then there's some great low-cost financing opportunities available in New Hampshire as well. The other mechanism that we've done quite a lot of these, our company with nonprofits and municipalities, is what we call a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. In this case, there's no upfront cost to install and use the solar on site. A mission-aligned investor, typically local, essentially finances the cost of the system. Those investors are able to take the tax credits and use them to offset their own taxes. That's how they generate their return. For the nonprofit, you have a predictable cost of energy over 25 years. You sign a power purchase agreement. You don't have any ongoing operations and maintenance responsibilities. And really importantly, you have an opportunity to purchase the system beginning in year 6 after the investor has realized their tax incentives. And you can purchase that system, buy that system out for a significantly discounted price, which really allows you to accrue tremendous energy savings. What does this look like? We like to talk about the levelized cost of energy. How does your cost of energy compare over time? And whenever we work with a customer, we would produce something that looks like this. And just to decode this chart a little bit, in this particular case, we projected for this customer, your cost of electricity under a power purchase agreement with an early buyout, that's what the B/O means, if you bought it out in year 6, was a little under 8 cents, a little under 9 cents per kilowatt hour over the lifetime of the system. If you hung on to that power purchase agreement for the entire 25 years of the PPA, you'd be at about 12.2 cents over time. If you bought it outright at the beginning, a turnkey purchase, you'd be at about 7 cents. And when you compare that to utility rates with no escalator, essentially a flat utility rate, that would be about 13.7 cents on a standard utility rate. And if you add 2.5% per year, which we do based on what the US Energy Information Administration projects for utility rates, that would be about 22.7 cents per year, per kilowatt hour. So this is a typical example that I would show you of how the cost of energy can compare in a solar array versus your sort of business as usual scenario. And Sarah, I think I'm going to pause mine now before we get into case studies and stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Okay, will do. Just give me a moment to get set up here. So hello, everyone. Mark asked me to join him today because my team, I'm again Sarah Brock at Clean Energy New Hampshire. We are a fellow nonprofit. I am standing in our Concord office, but I've got folks based around the state, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. We have a technical assistance program where we work with communities. Most of our work focuses on municipalities and businesses, as you'll see. But we answer the phone and we try to point people where they need to go, and we're a resource that you should know about. And we have a lot of experience working with folks to do solar as well as other projects. So I'm going to explain who we are, and I am going to then get into some of the resources that we have for folks like you who are trying to do projects. Make sure you know they exist. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time to look at some case studies, to hear from some of the other folks on the call who are resources for you. And I'm thrilled to hear that one of the nonprofits, let's see if I can remember which one, is actually working with you already, Mark, and I would love to hear their experience and why they're looking into solar. So we'll get to all that in a little bit. So to start, if you have not heard of Clean Energy New Hampshire, we are a small nonprofit based in Concord, but we work statewide. We are working toward a decarbonized energy system for New Hampshire, and mostly because of what Mark just shared. For New Hampshire, for our economy, for our livelihood, we really want to invest in clean local energy resources because that stabilizes costs for all of us. It keeps dollars local. It just makes sense. So we work a lot on helping people rally around that vision. We have a policy and advocacy arm. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement, and we do a lot of technical assistance. My team is the Energy Circuit Rider team. There are 7 of us. We are out in communities all the time. I think I've got a map here for you. Yep. This is the team. You may have seen some of us out and about. We've got 4 staff. You can see their faces and arrows pointing to where they live and work. These are regionally based staffers whose job is to mostly support municipalities in their community for the same reasons that you just heard Mark lay out for putting more money to mission. In a municipal case, it's putting more money toward not having to raise your property taxes, which is similarly important. But the sorts of reasons and the sorts of barriers that municipalities face are similar in many ways to nonprofits and trying to invest in solar. So we have supported nonprofits in each of these regions as they come to us asking questions. You can see in these little dots that we've worked with a lot of communities around the state on a lot of different projects. The majority, but maybe only still less than 50% tend to be solar. Energy efficiency is also common. In fact, this is a breakdown of some of the projects that we see. Our team is currently, and this is just the municipal side of our work. We do, as you probably read, have a team that works with small businesses around the state, particularly helping connect with USDA and other grant funding. So this is just the work we're doing in municipalities around the state. We're supporting projects in over 100 towns, almost 300 projects. A lot of them are solar, and that really comes down to solar making a lot of sense for a lot of communities. Energy efficiency is over here. We have historically done a lot of energy efficiency. A lot of towns looking at policies that will make it easier to install solar in their communities. Efficiency, electric vehicles, that's what EVs stands for. Construction, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC. energy storage outreach projects. This gives you a sense of the kinds of projects that we support. And this is the kind of work we do, again, mostly historically with municipalities, but we will help anyone who comes in our doors to the extent that we're able. We tend to meet communities where they are, and you certainly understand this. Municipalities are similar to nonprofits in that you have limited capacity and certainly limited expertise to project manage complex energy projects. So we try to help you, provide examples, walk you through the process, and connect you with who you need to be connected with. Which brings me to, I'm putting my friend Scott on the spot here as well. Scott's here today too. There are places for you to go, and I think this is mainly why Mark wanted me to be here. There are folks who are not businesses, even B Corp businesses, who are here to help you if you are looking at addressing your energy costs or shifting to clean energy, whether that's efficiency, whether that's solar, whether that's fleet, whatever it might be. We encourage you to give a call. Scott's at the at CDFA, Community Development Finance Authority. Scott and I will answer the phone. There are others around the states who would say similar things. I know Sandra Jones from Parai is also on the call today. And Sandra, you can explain whether you're statewide or otherwise, but she's another great resource. If you've got an idea and you don't know where to start, there are those of us who will pick up the phone and help you get connected with where you need to be and help you identify programs you should be pursuing. So please don't be shy. This is refresher. You heard from Mark the basic how you might go about getting a solar system for your nonprofit. The own it outright turnkey option is what we generally recommend if you can possibly manage it, because that is where you're going to get the best possible savings and payback. That being said, of course, you may not be able to come up with the capital. I'll be showing you a resource that lists as many of the programs that I'm aware of where you might be able to help get that capital together. And then the other options, which Mark mentioned, are power purchase agreement. The one that Mark didn't explicitly mention is a lease, which we tend to see more often in larger scale community solar type projects in municipal settings. But it's not irrelevant to mention, if a power purchase agreement is an arrangement where someone like a Revision can help you to put the solar up, they own it and they manage it, and you can buy it out in 5 years. A lease is different in that you're never going to buy it out. You know that from the start. And so the terms are set up without the expectation that you have a buyout option. So if you know going in that you just never want to own this thing, it might be worthwhile also getting a quote from someone who can help you out with a lease so that you have that option as well. The term, comparing the 25 years and the 25 years can be better with a lease if you know you're not going to buy it out. But more on that if you have questions. I'm going to jump now into some resources for you that I'm going to drop in the chat. If you'll give me a moment to find the chat again. Let me stop my share for a moment. In the chat, you're going to see 2 links. I'm going to reshare my screen in a moment to walk you through them, but feel free to open them up. We're going to start with the funding spreadsheet. So if you click that first link, I'll take you in there with me. Let me share my screen again. This is a resource that my team started to put together back at the end of 2023, when there was just a lot of funding coming from the various Inflation Reduction Act funds, and it was impossible to track what was available. And we were trying to just put it all in one place so that our team could provide better technical assistance. And we made it available to our members. We've now made this available to the public, which I think is great. It is imperfect. We would like to, and I think we are committed now as a team to keeping it up to date. So I look to you, partners on the call who have funding sources, who I may put you on the spot in a minute to chat about those sources, to help me keep this up to date, and we will be doing that. But this is something you should bookmark if you are on this call today, and I hope folks who see this recording later will bookmark this and reference it over time. What it is, there's a little about tab, but the tab that matters really is this grants and incentives. And you'll see the source, there's a hyperlink. We've given you a sense of what kind it is. Most of what's on here are rebates, grants, and loans. You'll see who's eligible. So since we are talking to nonprofits, you can scan down this yellow column, and if there's a check mark in there, read the description and see what it's about. We've given you a sense of the deadlines, and we try to keep up to date on this with respect to what's open and what you should be keeping an eye out for. There's a little description, there's some hints about funding amount, there's a contact and how you could get more information and who you could reach out to, and then some other notes. So relatively easy to navigate. I've organized it here for you by sort of who's providing programs. And I'm just going to quickly scan through so you can get a hint of the kinds of programs that might be available if you were interested in this. New Hampshire Saves comes up. This is not a solar thing, but if you see, there's a lot of resources there. The New Hampshire Department of Energy has a number of programs that they administer. You can, I didn't mention this, but there is a column here for funding source, and you can see who administers each of the programs. There's a whole bunch of them that are administered by the New Hampshire Department of Energy. Some of them are relevant to nonprofits. There's a commercial and industrial bulk fuel fed wood pellet central heating systems rebate. That's a mouthful. But if you were looking at replacing a heating system and going for wood, there's a number of thermal energy programs. That's one of them. There is a similar type of scope you can see here: solar thermal, biomass technologies, geothermal. There has been in the past a New Hampshire Renewable Energy Fund program related to that. There's a community solar program that nonprofits are eligible for. That's mainly like to nonprofits who would be looking to put solar that would benefit low-income residents. There is a program for replacing heavy-duty diesel vehicles with electric vehicles. Nonprofits are operating heavy-duty vehicles, but you would be eligible. Then we get into the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. There is a Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and this has to do, there are some nonprofits that relate to wastewater and water pollution and that sort of thing. So that's why that's are checked. Less relevant for those of you on the call. And then we get into a whole chunk of programs from CDFA, and Scott Mislansky's on the call with us today and can answer questions about these when we get through this quick orientation. If you've got this up, you can scan energy efficiency, solar, energy audits, heat pumps. These are loans and grant programs. I would highlight that I would highlight just talking to Scott for programs like this is the best thing. We have some colleagues today from Community Loan Fund here, and I will apologize to Community Loan Fund because I am noticing something is missing here and I don't know why. Also, my colleague Doug and I were trying desperately to update our section on CLS programs, and we were realizing we didn't understand enough about your program. So you can help me update this later. But they have several, and a couple things I would highlight with respect to CLF. One is that they actually offer a service that will do grant writing support for you. Big project. It does cost. You have to pay them, I think it's $150 an hour or something. But they'll do a free initial consult to give you a sense of what they can do. And for large projects, it'd be really helpful.
Sarah, your sound keeps cutting out.
Thank you for telling me. Tell me if it continues. I'm not sure why that would be.
You're coming in and out. Thank you.
Is it to the point where you cannot understand me, or is it just annoying?
Just a second ago, you went out completely. So
okay, great. Well, explore this if I disappear and tell me if it's getting bad. I can always call in from my phone if it's becoming a real issue. There are some programs from USDA. So I'm not going to go into all of these. I'm happy to dig in Q&A, but I would encourage you to explore this and to know that there are folks like me who are happy to take a call and try to help you navigate and narrow this list and figure out who you should talk to next. I wish I could say there was funding falling from the sky for these projects, but I do think it's worth looking into. There may be something that will fit in your case. And of course, none of this touches private foundations, which is another, for you nonprofits, good source for these types of capital campaigns. The next thing that I will mention, if you can hear me, are tax credits. There is a explainer in the chat that I recommend you open. I don't think I'm gonna open it for you. I'll just chat at you for now. I see some of you are in there. In the Inflation Reduction Act passed through the last administration, there was a provision that added a detail to the tax code in our fair country that allows tax exempt entities to access tax credits. And it's basically as simple as that. It didn't change the tax credits, but there's a whole slew of clean energy tax credits, including a generous tax credit for solar, which can cover 30% of your project cost. And it is now possible for nonprofits to access that. And by access that, I mean you have to file a free filing registration, you get a number, and then you actually file a tax return just for that purpose, and you get a check from the IRS for the amount of 30% of your project. We've been supporting a number of communities and nonprofits in this in the last couple of years. There's a detailed section in this guide related to, is this program in danger? Because obviously we know that the current administration federally has not looked favorably on clean energy. So there are some who are concerned about the future of those tax credits. I will say, read that section. And in short, the guidance we're giving our communities and partners is that if you can install by the end of this calendar year, or at least significantly begin the project by the end of the calendar year, you should be able to access the current tax credits. But until we get further into this Congress being in existence, we're not going to know whether they're going to change the tax code for the future. But for this year, we're hoping that the projects will be safe. And I will say that for communities, municipalities, and nonprofits, this program, direct pay, as we call it colloquially, it's officially called elective pay, has been a game changer. Previously, nonprofits and municipalities and other tax exempt entities have almost had to go the power purchase agreement route in order to take advantage of the 30% tax credits. And since we've been able to get them directly from the IRS through this program, it opens up the options for investing in solar and investing in other relevant clean energy technologies, because you can choose whether you want to direct purchase or go the PPA route. And this money takes a big chunk off the price tag. There are lenders who will do bridge loans to help you get from the place where you have to purchase the thing and then get your tax credit back some number of months or years later. But it's a wonderful resource. So I am going to pause there. That was a lot, but mainly meant to just orient you to some resources. And I would love to, first of all, see if there's direct questions. But then second, I would make an open call to those of you who are here, and I will call some of you out. I know we have Scott Mislansky here from CDFA, that's Community Development Finance Authority. We also have Don and Elise from Community Loan Fund. We have Ian Carmichael from Northern Borders Regional Commission, which I didn't explicitly call out, but is listed there, and Sandra Jones from Paray. And any or all of you would be more than welcome to share a few notes that you'd really hope that folks take away.
Hey, Sarah, before we jump into those folks, do you mind if we share the case studies real quick? Just going to do that real quick. And then I didn't know if you had any, Sarah, as well.
Yeah, I have 3. Let me show the 3 I have, and then we can jump to yours.
So we'll zip through these case studies. Sarah's got 3, I've got 4. They'll be really quick. And then I think, yes, inviting your questions and some other guests to share their experiences will be great.
Sounds good. These are actually case studies from Scott Mislansky. This is one, Hannah Grimes Center in Keene. This was a rooftop solar array. You can see what that looks like on a flat roof. This was just last year, and it used the Community Center Investment Program, which actually doesn't exist anymore as I understand it. But they also used the federal tax credits, and they had some building reserve funds that they had set aside to do this project. This is up in Bethlehem. Forest Society. This was a ground mount system, which you can't see in this picture, but you can see the building here. It was a building that had been damaged. I think it was a fire. There was a big renovation and rebuild. This is a net zero facility, and they went ahead and they did ground source heat pumps, and they sized this array to cover the electricity needed for the building and the heat pumps. So this really was quite the undertaking. They used the CDFA tax credits program, and they also had a slew of government and foundation grants and donors that helped to make that project happen. And then finally, this is Lakes Region Community Developers, a project called Avery Hill Solar, a little bit farther back. I'm sure, Hooray, you were probably involved in this somehow, maybe. This was rooftop solar at affordable housing. So CDFA Community Energy Loan Fund was involved, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation was involved, the New Hampshire Renewable Energy Fund was involved. That was the Department of Energy. And you can see here, there's solar slathering the top of these affordable housing facilities, which is great. And I'll turn it back over to Mark for 3 more brief case studies.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so we love case studies. Those are excellent ones, Sarah, that you just shared. I'll just share a few. This is the Capital Center for the Arts. Many people have been there. This is actually the Bank of New Hampshire stage, 43 kilowatt system. The system generates about 47,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year, offsets more than 50,000 pounds of carbon dioxide a year. A pretty small system, about 113,000. This was a power purchase agreement, and we estimate that they will save over $250,000 over the lifetime of the system in energy savings. This is New Hampshire Food Bank down in Manchester. Awesome organization. Larger system, you can see this is a rooftop array. They have a large building there, generates over 250,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year, over 250,000 pounds of carbon dioxide offset a year. This was a little over $500,000. This was a turnkey project. What was really great about this for the food bank was that they raised all the money through grants. We helped them, we helped support their fundraising. They had one particular donor who was very interested in their long-term financial viability. And so because the energy savings, over $1.5 million, was going to just allow them to take that money and put that towards more supporting more families that have food insecurity. This is the Monadnock Humane Society. This is a small ground mount system, about 89 kilowatts, about $240,000. They financed this through a power purchase agreement. And this is great because they just bought out their system. I think it was we're in year 6 or year 7. And we estimate they'll save over $500,000. I love this photo on top because this is like such a classic New Hampshire. It's dark and stormy, but actually there's a lot of sun hitting the solar panels. So even though it's dark and stormy, they're actually producing energy on this winter day. And then I'll wrap up with this last one. We've done a lot of great projects with housing authorities in New Hampshire, Newmarket, Portsmouth Housing Authority, a number of projects with Keene Housing. This is a nice project with Newmarket Housing Authority. This was a turnkey project, a number of small rooftop arrays that you can see in the photo. It's going to save them over $1 million in their energy costs. And this was fully funded through a grant through the New Hampshire Department of Energy that supports solar for reducing energy costs for low and moderate income communities. I would just wrap by saying, I think the 100% solar nonprofit is possible. That example from the Forest Society's Rocks Reservation is a great one. I know that Clean Energy New Hampshire, Revision, and many others would love to help you figure out how you can get there for your nonprofit. And I am going to stop sharing my screen, and yeah, let's open it up for questions and perspectives and experiences.
While folks are thinking, Mark, I noticed Madeline had a couple of one-on-one questions. Lifespan of solar panels, and can you explain how net metering works?
Sure. So solar panels are a pretty great piece of technology, I gotta say. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory has shown that solar panels can still be operating at high productivity 40 years into their lifespan. The panels that we use in my company have have warranties for either 25 or 30 years, and they derate at less than 0.5% per year. So what that means is at year 20, we expect them to be producing more than 90% of the energy that they were on day one. At year 40, we project more than 80%. So they last a long time. And then how does net metering work? In a really simple way, and we can talk more about it, but if your solar at any point where your solar array is producing more energy than your building is consuming, that energy gets pushed into the grid because you can only use so much of it. So think of those great peak months in June and July and August, but even sometimes, on the shoulder seasons, my own solar array right now is producing more than we're consuming at our house. And you are compensated. The utility essentially will pay you for the value of that energy. I don't want to go into the gory details, but you have a net metering meter that's associated with your solar array, and it tracks how much energy you are pushing into the grid. And then on your monthly bill, you are credited for the value of that energy.
Thank you, Mark. So maybe I will call on a couple of folks. Maybe I'll start with Ian from, thank you for spotlighting me. Ian from Northern Borders Regional Commission. I sort of purposely didn't even really mention you, but is there anything you want to share with these folks about what NBRC can do for nonprofits who are interested in clean energy?
Sure. So the Northern Border Regional Commission has 2 rounds of grant funding each year, a spring round and a fall round. And if you go to the nbrc.gov website, program areas, and into Catalyst, you can find the user manual at the bottom of that page. There's really 2 ways you can pursue clean energy with an NBRC grant. One is through community scale clean or renewable energy. So, like, let's say a nonprofit wanted to shoulder standing up one of those larger solar arrays. That would be possible through NBRC funding. And another is as you're pursuing an infrastructure project. Let's say you're looking to build a new facility that is going to host a business advising program. You could write into that grant application that you intend to put solar panels on the roof and that you want to make it a net zero facility, something like that. One of the challenges we're currently facing in terms of federal funding is we'll call it a disagreement between the Unleashing American Energy executive order and some of the things that are available through grant funding. So my only caveat would be you really want to, this is absolutely on point. If you're looking at applying for NBRC and using it to pursue solar panels, you want to talk about the cost savings. The point of this is economic sustainability of your organization and cost savings moreover than anything climate change related. But other than that, I'm always available to talk about ideas that you might have and see if it might be a good alignment with NBRC.
Amazing. Sandra, you put a note in the chat. Do you want to just say hi really quickly and let people see your face? Sandra says that she's happy to set up phone or Zoom calls with any nonprofit to share resources, tips, and lessons learned. And I would recommend taking Sandra up on it. She has a wealth of information.
Sure, yeah. Like Clean Energy New Hampshire, we do a lot of advising and happy to do that for anyone. We also welcome people to become members so we can work with you even more. But we have organized solar projects for about 8 different nonprofits. And it is an excellent way for nonprofits to reduce their operating costs. And it's a fairly easy fundraising campaign, I have found when working with other nonprofits, including our own nonprofit. Like Mark mentioned, for the food bank, donors really like the win-win-win part of installing solar on a nonprofit because they know it reduces operating costs every year. So I want to reiterate, trying to make a project happen in 2025 to get that 30% elective pay is a really good carrot to move quickly on a project. And I also want to mention, net zero projects are awesome, but there's nothing wrong with doing something within your budget. So if you've got $15,000, and that's a doable amount to raise, some solar is better than no solar. So don't let, too big of a price scare you away. But yes, I'm happy to share lessons learned, and my email, I can put that in the chat as well.
That's such a
Said
great
Don's
point.
hand. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, Sandra, I think just want to emphasize that last point you made. That's a great point. We always, of course, as a solar company, we want to help you maximize your solar opportunity. And so we'll look at your roof or your available land and say, what's possible here? But then, and as well as your energy use. But at the end of the day, we also have to figure out what's possible on your end. And so if you have a budget, any good solar partner can help you figure out what's the optimal system you can put in place for that amount of money.
Don, I'm so glad you raised your hand. I was about to say, can my CLF friends chime in if you have anything you'd like to say?
Hi, I don't. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I do have a question though. So we
Great.
are currently considering putting rooftop solar on our buildings in Concord. We need to, so thank you, Mark. We do have an estimate. So, but we want to do a price comparison and a long-term comparison on the solar with the upfront cost, which is pretty hefty, against like Clean 100. So has anyone done that analysis where, we're hoping to do an apples to apples comparison so we can share that with senior managers so we have an actual comparison against those two options. I'm just wondering if anyone's done that.
I mean, comparing against Clean 100 is effectively just choosing a different utility baseline, and then you can do a similar thing to what Mark showed us, which is, okay, well, if Clean 100 is currently X per kilowatt hour, then let's escalate that by 0% and let's escalate that by 2.5% and let's compare that. That part's easy. I will say that my team has, and we're happy to share this and maybe even help you do this, a calculator tool that we use for really anyone that when we're looking at turnkey projects where you're going to buy them outright, sort of plug in the numbers and project out the savings. The installers will often have done that, but it could be nice to sort of put several quotes into the same calculator and see what that looks like. So I'm happy if you want to follow up with me to connect with someone on my team and we can see if we can help you do that.
That would be great. Can you share your email in the chat, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Don, I
Any
think
other thoughts?
your solar partner should be able to help you with that as well, because any kind of model that we do to help a customer understand what is the lifetime cost of the system and what are your projected lifetime energy savings, one of the key critical inputs is what is the current value of energy and cost of energy. And so we use a revision, a trailing multi-period average of the utility in which the customer is located. So because utility rates can change quite a bit every 6 months in New Hampshire, so we look at multiple rate periods, average them, and then use that as kind of an average starting energy rate. But you can plug in, what's the 100% renewable option that's available as the starting rate as well, like Sarah's saying. So it's a great idea to do that, and it's not something that I've done before, but it should be very easy for whoever has quoted your system. I don't know if it's us or somebody else, but
It is you. It is you. So I'll read. I think it's Eric.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can follow up with me as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Scott, if you're on the call, I wonder if Scott Meslansky can talk a little bit about CDFA, and because you've got a current grant opportunity.
Yeah, hello everyone. Scott Meslansky. I'm Director of Clean Energy Finance at CDFA. And I work on a combination of some of the programs that Sarah mentioned earlier, but in short, it's our financing for renewables and energy efficiency. We have an energy audit program on the business, grant program on the business side. And then we also have a low moderate income solar program, though that funding is mostly spoken for. I did want to mention, though, that in thinking about projects, in agreement with what some earlier things that have been said, it's important to think not just about the solar, but can you reduce your energy use first? And maybe then, because sometimes a roof can't accommodate covering all of your solar needs, then you're reducing the amount of load you have. Your solar can do more for you at that point. And sometimes, actually, if you combine projects and look a little bit more big picture, then you're looking at a capital project that might get grant funding from CDFA or Northern Borders as well. That kind of project might fit there. And so we have grant programs supporting nonprofits. A solar-only project usually wouldn't quite meet the mark as far as competitiveness. But if you're replacing your roof because you've got needs there and you're doing solar, or you're doing an overall efficiency project and doing solar, those things can potentially get grant dollars through organizations like ours and Northern Borders and others. So I just wanted to point that out and thinking about those things. And the last thing I wanted to say is when you're looking at solar, I review a lot of solar proposals as I talk to organizations. And it is really important, as Mark was saying, to make sure you're kind of looking at the apples to apples. And sometimes you might need technical assistance with that. There's a few metrics that are really important, whether it's, and you have to compare them all, cost per watt, what's that escalation, what are they assuming the utility rate is going to increase each year? What is the setback they're doing on a roof? Because some place might just fill the whole roof with panels, and then you learn later that actually there's a setback requirement. So they're showing you're going to get a ton more than you actually might get. These are all things that you should try to look at comparatively and get some help to do that. And, I think if we're talking with revision and you ask that question, that's fine. They have a lot of experience in different towns doing that. Some other installers may not. So that's just an important piece to consider. I hope that helps.
That's great, Scott. Yeah, not all solar is created equal. And I definitely think you want to get more than one quote and really lean into the details and what are the key assumptions that your solar partner is making when they've projected your costs and your generation and your savings. I see a question. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to, this question comes up quite a bit, which is, are solar companies able to give bids using BABA requirements and non-BABA requirements? So for those who don't know, BABA is Build America, Buy America, or Buy America, Build America. It is part of, or is included in the Inflation Reduction Act. It requires certain components to be domestically manufactured and assembled. And it's causing some conniptions in the solar community. I think that's fair to say, as those requirements start to come online with certain federal funding mechanisms. So for us right now at Revision, our racking is all domestic steel and complies with BABA. So whether it's rooftop racking or ground mount racking, I think I can't speak for any other solar company, so I can just speak to ours. Most of our panels now are assembled in the US, but they do have some components that are manufactured in Southeast Asia. We don't buy anything from China for a bunch of different reasons for our company, but again, I can't speak for other companies. But we don't have a lot of silicon wafer manufacturing capacity in the US yet. There is a lot of onshoring of renewable energy manufacturing that is happening in the US now as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. So we do expect, and our suppliers have told us, that we will have modules coming that will be able to meet domestic manufacturing requirements, but there are different levels of requirements that the federal government has. So I couldn't tell you today that we have a BABA compliant module that we could put on your roof. But I do hope and expect that we will have that in the future. Fortunately, there is an exception right now for projects that have started construction this year and that have the modules in place by next summer. So right now we're operating under an exception for modules. And then the last sort of key component for solar arrays are the inverters. We are not able to source BABA compliant inverters today, but our primary inverter suppliers for our company have told us they will have them in the first quarter of 2026. So we do expect to be able to be BABA compliant on inverters. So it is like a component by component process to be able to quote BABA compliant projects. We can do that now, but we have to frame the install timeline and some assumptions into our proposals, and we're pretty transparent about that.
And Mark hinted at this, but the reason Colleen's asking is because I believe the project you're working on has a grant that's coming from federal dollars. And this is something that if you have federal money attached to your project, these are the kinds of requirements you are likely to see in the fine print.
Yeah, fine print matters. Sometimes it's not BABA, but it's American iron and steel, which we can pretty well comply with today. So it really, you have to talk with your grant funder, make sure that you're really clear on the requirements, and then make that very clear to your solar developer partner on what that is from the outset, so that they can properly price that in, make sure that they can tell you whether or not they can comply and on what timeline.
Elise was pointing out that some of you may have heard hints of the Solar for All programs that are not finalized. We can't really speak to what they'll exactly look like, but that will have BABA compliance in there as well, again, because it's federal dollars coming into the state.
So we're in this time of transition. I do think the solar industry and all the manufacturers of solar components are well aware that this is going to be really important, and they are working to onshore that manufacturing capacity. You can't build and turn on a solar module plant in 6 months, but I do think it's coming, and I think it's being driven by the Inflation Reduction Act. I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. Good questions, and please do follow up with Sarah, with me, with any of the other folks who put their information into the thread here, and we will send the slides out for all of you, and look forward to having some more conversations.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Mark and Sarah. We really appreciate your partnership on this topic. And again, we'll follow up with an email to all of you with the recording, slides, additional resources that were shared. Feel free to pass those on to your teams, colleagues, peer organizations, boards. We definitely want as many folks as possible to have access to this information. So thanks again so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.